This is David Tulis. They say that I'm the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga because they believe in my marketing language. I am, in fact, a very good marketer of liberty and also small businesses. We are a for-profit commercial radio station, and we have the best commercials out there. And so part of my commercial for David Tulis is that I'm the smartest guy with a bow tie, but it really hides that line of language hides an ugly blot. You might say a wart with bristly hairs coming from it. And it's this, that I'm the slow man of Chattanooga, the slow man. I ask the dumb questions. I'm just slow. I don't get it. I'm not up to speed with innovations in the progressive theory. And so I'm really behind the times. And I ask, some say, the best questions because I am indeed such a slothful thinker and a slothful man, just not current on things. If you go to Nooganomics.com, our chief sponsor on the David Tulis Show, you'll see a story today that I'm remiss in not having gotten out earlier, and it's about my correspondent. I now have 3 correspondents in the Tennessee prison systems. I'm very well set. These are people who work without pay, and they give me detailed letters with legal citations of the problems and the machinations in the system. And helping me in that labor is a editor and reporter in Connecticut, Sharon Rondeau. But she and I are sharing sources, if you will. And one of them is Grenda Ray Harmer in his, I think he's 65 years old. And the headline today is that chilled cells, drugging of inmate, and corporate chiseling are seen in TN prison. And we're talking, in his case, about the slave camp in Wartburg, Tennessee. It's called Morgan County Correctional Complex. And Sharon, you run the Post and Email, which is the platform that covers, I think, better than any media outlet in the country, the prison system in Tennessee. You have many contacts, many sources. You might say on the wrong side of the bar, and you have some news for my listener and for me about Grenda Ray Harmer in Wartburg. What is he saying to you in his latest handwritten missive?
Well, thank you very much, David, for having me on. And yes, I got this letter just yesterday. It's dated November 28th of 17, and I will be posting this so people can actually see it in his handwriting and not have to take my word for it. And it's the inmate that you mentioned, Grenda Ray Harmer, TDOC number 88710. He begins the letter, and I'm going to read exactly what he wrote, whether the English is right or not. Things have went from bad to even worse. First, they moved me to an end cell that is cold. They got cold air blowing, making my cell even colder. My current cell is, at best, 10 degrees above zero. Most of the time, it's around 15 to 20 degrees below zero, and it's going to get worse. I'm constantly wearing 2 thermal tops, 3 T-shirts, and 1 sweater with my coat on, plus my prison blues on. And he does expound on that, but that's the beginning of the letter.
Well, how can what do you make of
this?
This
has been going on for a while. I know the letter I got from him early last week, in which he mentioned some of the things you just mentioned about someone being over-medicated and other problems. This is unreal. This does not have to be like this. We all know prison is not supposed to be a walk in the park. I get that. But nobody should have to sit there bundled up in winter clothing. And then he was told that because of that, he was punished. The letter goes on to say that as a result of all this, he said, third, he listed a second thing that had happened. I'll read that too to make it, bring it in context. He said, second, on November 22nd, Corporal Perry went and told inmates, I've got a child molestation charge, which is totally false. And he's right about that. That is a false accusation. I've read the documents that had to do with his 1998 incarceration. They're hard to find because Tennessee doesn't release anything, but I was able to get a hold of them. That was not one of the charges. There were other serious charges, and he was convicted of some of them or all of them, from what I understand. But that child molestation is not one of them. So to make that clear. Then he goes on to say, third, I'm now being issued a disciplinary report. I was so cold I was wearing my toboggan and gloves. Now, I don't know if in your area, if a toboggan is a heavy jacket, because I know up here it means a certain kind of a sled.
Right. When you say toboggan, I'm thinking it's a kind of a heavy hat, but I haven't looked it up. Sharon
Oh,
Rondo.
okay.
Go
All right.
ahead.
Maybe in a different, yeah, sometimes different words mean different things in parts of the country. But anyway, he says, I was wearing my toboggan and gloves. Mr. Gibson told me that I can't wear a toboggan during inspection. I told Mr. Gibson that I'm cold because cold air is being blown into my cell, that Mr. Gibson needs to turn the heat on. Mr. Gibson then said, I don't get no recreation and no pod time. Pod time is the only time I'm permitted showers. Corporal D. Cooper opened my door for recreation and asked if I was going to recreation, and I said no because Mr. Gibson said I couldn't go. That's when Corporal Cooper stated, quote, I don't care what he said, I run this unit, unquote. I looked at Corporal Cooper, stood up, and said, okay. That's when Corporal Cooper said, fine. Oh, he put that in quotes. Fine, I'll write you up. And then Grenda goes on to say, I was intentionally placed in a no-win situation. If I would have went out, I'd been issued a disciplinary report for refusing a direct order. When I got up to go out to recreation, Corporal D. Cooper wrote me up. For what? I don't know yet. This is unreal. If this is not slavery, and I know you said it was a prison camp, this is slavery. How is this different from people being kept in chains and owned by other men and other women and being forced to work outside in cotton fields? I don't see how this is any different.
Well, my listener, Sharon Rondo, is wondering when he hears the bad grammar and he hears a reference to 0 degrees, he's wondering how you would esteem this as a reliable source. Say something about the degrees that Grenda Ray Harmer in the Wartburg prison is mentioning. That seems like very cold. It seems like it wouldn't get that cold unless there was actually an air conditioner running, or if it were part of the freezing unit of the kitchen area of the prison.
Yes,
that's very cold.
And that's true. I do have questions about the actual temperature or temperatures that he's mentioning. I think that's a totally valid question, and I'm going to write to him today and find out, how he knows that. But I will say it's been over a year that this inmate has been corresponding with me. He has sent voluminous, and I mean voluminous, documentation, copies of grievances, copies of letters that have gone to the commissioner, copies of letters that have gone to other media outlets and state representatives. He sent me a card that one of your previous guests, Representative John Ray Clemens from the Nashville area, Representative Clemens sent him a card acknowledging that he had received his concerns and grievances and complaints and that type of thing that had been expressed in a letter. I have that card. And I let Clemens' office know that, too. But I happen to have that because Grenda Ray Harmer sent it to me. The reports he has made have been spot on. And these have been checked out. For instance, in June, when he went on that hunger strike, and Nisa Taylor, the TDOC spokeswoman, refused to get back to me about it. And then she accused me of threatening her, which I did not do. I just said I have a deadline, and I'd like to put in your feedback on whether or not he's being checked medically, whether or not any intervention could be made. Just if you could check on his situation. And she when I then got back to her after not hearing from her for 2 days, she said, well, you're threatening me. I said, no, I'm not threatening you. All I said was I will be publishing whether or not I get a response from you. That's all. That's very normal in the world of journalism. But at any rate, she had brushed it off. And then I got a note from someone in Tennessee of an urgent nature about 32 days into that hunger strike that Mr. Harmer was in a very serious situation and could even be deceased. So I sent Nisa Taylor an email that night, and she got back to me, and she did get back to me right away. Something in her note, I know she can't divulge medical information. I fully understand that, and I wasn't asking for any medical information, but something in her note made me think that either he had been taken to the hospital or some other kind of improvement in his situation had been made, but I thought it was the former rather than the latter. It turned out that was correct. He had been taken to the hospital. He was in there for 3 or 4 days. He sent me in his next letter a copy of a menu from the hospital. I still have it. I never posted it, but I do have it. I can put that out there. The menu, and that's what he was given to choose his food. And of course, he hadn't eaten in 32 days other than water and milk. But no one checked on him medically. He passed out, and he said his blood pressure was so low, they kept him overnight in the prison cell trying to get it up with their, whatever they have for medical staff, and they couldn't get it up. So, of course, they brought him to the hospital in an ambulance. So that really happened. And there's so so much documentation of that. So he's extremely reliable and very truthful. I have found not one statement that was not truthful. So this can all be proved, and we are proving this. And then there was a situation which you know about, regarding the gang member who had threatened him. And of course, they couldn't be put together in the same unit. And then what do? In late October, they put this gang member, the same one, right across the hall from him in the same solitary confinement area. And so when he complained, of course, they tried not to do anything about it. And Nisa Taylor said that his letters were completely fictitious. Well, then we both get letters that said that on November 3rd, the Crips gang member was moved out of the unit. So they did do an investigation of whatever type they do, and they did this. So he's not going to make this up. Here's another example of how his credibility is extremely high. On two occasions, once in, it was last fall, I believe, I'd have to check all my stories, and the other one was in the spring. Mr. Harmer wrote to me, and he said, they've discontinued my medications. Now, at that point, the first time, he was at the Core Civic Run prison in Hartsville, which is the Trousdale Turner Correctional Complex, the one that Dimitri Kalidimos has been doing so much reporting on. The second time in April, he was at South Central Correctional Facility, SCCF. So on both occasions, different months, different years even, he wrote and he said, they've discontinued my 3 medications and one of them is potentially life-saving. So they wouldn't do anything on his end, and I did get in touch with Nisa Taylor and she didn't answer me. So I then got a hold of a spokesman for Correct Care Solutions, CCS, it's on the web, for that company. And I said, I asked him in an email, I said, is there a reason why this inmate has been, his medications have been discontinued? And I think he got back to me once. He didn't really say what he was going to do or what he wasn't going to do. But the next thing I get, maybe 7 to 10 days later, and it takes 3 days for his letters to get to me too. So that's another thing. I get a letter from Grenda Harmer that says they've reinstated one. It was either 1 or 2 of the medications. He says the third one is coming. And he says, by the time you get my next letter, I will have had it. And in fact, that's what happened. Now, that happened not on one occasion, but on 2 occasions. Now, why would he say he's not getting his medications? I didn't tell him what I was doing on my end. I didn't tell him if I was doing anything. But I did what I thought I could to get those medications reinstated, and I've done it for others as well. And then, as I said, he wrote me letters saying, okay, thank you very much. My medications have been returned to me, and they're being dispensed as they should be, as prescribed. So this cannot be a coincidence of any nature.
We're talking with Sharon Rondeau. She is the editor and publisher of thepostemail.com. It's The Post and Email, but you can find it online at thepostemail.com. She's a prolific writer, and I'd say among journalists is the real expert on the prisons in Tennessee, having many sources among inmates, some of greater reliability than others, some more self-serving than others with a lot of time on their hands. I'm telling Grenda Harmer in a letter that's going out today, Sharon Rondeau, that in a way I get way too much mail from him as he has so much time. But I also admit that I realize he's a man who has no time at all. He's often helping other inmates with their grievances, and he's doing a lot of reading. And I'm sure at the end of the day, he goes to sleep exhausted, not from inactivity, but from inactivity. Again, we're talking with Sharon Rondeau. She is a writer, and I'd say she's the leading journalist covering prisons in Tennessee. So if you, my listener, know someone in prison or know someone who has a family member there, make sure, go out of your way and connect that person with Sharon Rondeau. She covers that system very well with a strong emphasis, not on administration, bland blanket denials, that kind of thing, but on reporting what inmates are telling her. And I'm gaining some insight through her work in this very important of justice and local economy, because in the end, prisons are a non-local economy solution to justice, and we are here arguing for a you might say a more biblical, godly model, a God-approved model of judgment, which involves restitution, primarily victims' rights. Well, Sharon, let's mention just quickly other aspects of this story. And it broke this week here in Chattanooga with a report on the Tennessee comptroller of the Treasury's audit of the Department of Corrections. We're hearing this story late here. It was broken in mid-July by Dimitri Kaladinos of TV4 in Nashville. What did that report say in a nutshell? And what's going on there?
Well, it was a bombshell story, I think, for her. And to say this, Demetria has done some wonderful reporting, as we were saying off air. Another thing about Grenda Harmer, many of the things he told me about that core civic prison in Hartsville were reported by Demetria months later, because they launched their own investigation. So I will say his reports were borne out by her. Now, I didn't go through the comptroller's report. In all honesty, I did not do that. You sent me the link, which was very nice of you. And I read, of course, her article and her highlights. But the staff ratio is not right. And the inmates, I've had dozens of inmates tell me in letters that there are not enough staffers and that the turnover is very, very high. That was one of the things that the comptroller's report cited, that there are just not enough staff members. And then other things that have been cited previously by Channel 4 are violence and assault, all kinds of assault. And this goes both ways. Staff on inmates, inmates on staff, or inmates on inmates. I don't know about staff upon staff, but that's another thing that she has focused on. But it's a terrible problem. Now, Channel 4 kind of zoomed in on the core civic prison or prisons. I have heard from inmates at many, many other institutions, and Tennessee has 14 prisons, I understand, and I've gotten letters from just about, people from just about all of them, and they say that these problems are systemic. There are certain problems that are more serious. For instance, at the Hartsville prison, at TTCC, the staffing is a real problem, and the gang activity, gangs roaming around, gang members, and they basically call the shots. They basically run the prison. This is what I've been told, and I've been told this by a minimum of 40 different inmates over the course of the last year and a half, almost 2 years now that I've been getting letters since that prison opened. So it's a terrible problem, and gang activity, as you can see, is also a problem at Morgan County. And I would personally like to see more emphasis on all of the Tennessee prisons. What are the systemic problems within all of them? Each, of course, having maybe its own particular issues. But and as I think I hinted to you, I've got a bombshell story coming out on the Turney Center Industrial Complex. That's going to be out today or tomorrow, and that is unlike any other story I've ever done. That is coming out, and people are just not going to believe how Tennesseans are treating their own kin, their own folk. They're treating other Tennesseans like this. I see no reason for this cruelty. It's not necessary.
One of the reasons I think that Grenda Harmer is a reliable informant and correspondent, Sharon Rondeau of the Post and Email, is that he's making statements to the press which are harmful to him, and that is this: he becomes a persona non grata. He becomes an undesirable. He becomes someone that we have to just punish and keep in isolation because we don't want him to talk to the press. We don't want him to look up court cases. He is our enemy, and we're going to make sure he knows that we don't like him. And so he's making what I think legally could be called statements against interest. There are statements that hurt you, and the fact that they can hurt you to make them makes them more credible. Sharon.
That's correct. That is correct. And he has said that. He said that in his last administrative notice that he sent to Commissioner Tony Parker, which I posted in an article that's at the top of my state column. And there were two articles. The first one was subtitled, "Nobody Wants You," because that is what he was told. He said, we have to move the gang member out. This is what they told him. We have to move the gang member out of your area because we can't move you because nobody wants you. That's the essence of it. And then the administrative notice was to Tony Parker about some various problems. There was a violation of a Tennessee statute, which of course I'll say it's alleged, but I have very, very strong reason to believe that he's telling me the truth, as I've noted. But yes, he is making statements, and he says, I know they're going to retaliate against me. And now what do we have? Letters from him saying that for anybody to have to wear this much clothing inside a prison cell, it's cold. It may not be 10 degrees below zero. Maybe he's a little off there. Maybe it's 20 degrees above zero, or maybe it's 30. But the point is, when you sit in a cell all day long with that and you have to pile all that clothing on to wear it, that's absolutely ridiculous.
This is David Tulis. We're glad to be giving us a couple of minutes every time. And Sharon Rondeau of the Post and Email, we thank you for talking with us. Thank you very much, David. This is David Tulis, and Sharon Rondeau runs a terrific website, and it is thepostemail.com, thepostemail.com, and she is, I'd say, the best rehearsed journalist on prison conditions in Tennessee. She covers it primarily with original source material, and that is correspondence from inmates. We have some of that available here in Chattanooga, but of course online we have the internet, and it doesn't really matter where it's from, but it's there. And if you, my listener, care about this problem, which is prisons are anti-God, okay? They're anti-Christian and anti-God. They're anti-free market. They're anti-restoration. They're anti-victims' rights. If you care about that, if you think that that's something that you care about, if you think that's something that God cares about, well, then get interested in this story. It is a tremendous story, and the Times Free Press mentions one of my correspondents in its story this week, the follow-up account, the sidebar account on the audit, the state comptroller's office audit of the Department of Correction and its contractor, Robert Z. Whipple, who is complaining about his medical conditions and the need for shoes that the system is not giving to him, and he can't get his exercise if he doesn't have the right shoes on as diabetic. David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio, Digital FM.